Vincent was 36 years old, earned $69,000 a year operating a massive ZPMC container crane at Pier T in the port of Long Beach, and he was driving toward the most devastating situation of his life. He just didn't know the specifics yet. All he knew was the familiar, acidic dread pooling in his stomach, a feeling that had become the unofficial soundtrack to his marriage. It was Sunday, 5:42 p.m. The Southern California sun, a benevolent orb of molten gold, was beginning its slow descent, casting long, dramatic shadows from the palm trees lining the streets of Belmont Heights. The light was beautiful, the kind that painters tried to capture, but it felt like a mockery. Inside his 2012 Toyota Camry, a car with 187,000 miles on it and a monthly payment of $0, the air from the vents blew cool, but it couldn't touch the heat of anxiety coiling in his chest. He was on his way to his in-laws for Sunday dinner, a weekly ritual that had started as a warm tradition and had slowly curdled into a command performance. His wife, Anaya, was already there. She had taken her leased 2022 Lexus RX 350, a $680 per month liability he quietly covered from his overtime pay, hours earlier for what she called mother-daughter time. Vincent knew it was really a strategy session, a pre-game huddle where his flaws would be cataloged and her talking points against him refined. Anaya was a master of framing narratives, and in her telling, he was always the antagonist, too simple, too unambitious, too content with his blue-collar life. He was a good man, a steady man, but in her world, populated by her father's surgeon colleagues and her mother's socialite friends, his $69,000 salary was a punchline. He was a harbor crane operator, a black man with luminous, deep brown skin and hands calloused from work, a man who found a quiet pride in moving millions of dollars of global commerce with precision and skill. To her family, he was the man who worked at the docks. He turned onto Palmer Avenue, the houses growing larger, the lawns more meticulously manicured. Her parents' home was a $1.8 million Spanish-style villa with a terracotta roof and a garden that looked like it belonged in a magazine. Pulling up behind her gleaming white Lexus, he killed the engine of his humble Camry and sat for a moment in the sudden silence. He could see their silhouettes through the large arched window of the living room. Laughter floated out, brittle and sharp. His stomach tightened another notch. He had no idea how wrong he was about what was coming. He thought this would be another dinner of 1,000 tiny cuts, subtle jabs about his clothes, condescending questions about his job, pitying looks from his mother-in-law. He was prepared for that. He was not prepared for the clean, brutal amputation she had planned. He took a deep breath, adjusted the collar on his $45 polo shirt, and walked toward the heavy oak door, feeling like a man walking to his own execution. Have you ever felt that sense of dread before a family event, knowing you're walking into an ambush? Let us know in the comments if you've ever had to brace yourself just to walk through a loved one's door. The facade of their marriage had been built with the finest materials money could buy. Anaya's money, or rather, the money she spent as if it were hers. Their shared rental in a newer part of Long Beach was decorated from a West Elm catalog, a collection of mid-century modern furniture that cost a staggering $15,000, all charged to a joint credit card he was primarily responsible for. Vincent's contribution to the decor was a single framed photograph on his nightstand, a picture of his late mother, her smile warm and genuine. Anaya had once suggested moving it into the closet. "It just doesn't fit the aesthetics, sweetie," she'd said, her voice syrupy sweet. Vincent had simply looked at her, his expression unreadable, and said, "No." The picture stayed. Their domestic life was a series of carefully curated scenes, mostly for the benefit of Anaya's Instagram followers. There were photos of them clinking glasses of $80 bottles of wine at trendy restaurants in Belmont Shore, with captions full of hashtags like #couplegoals and #blessed. There were no photos of Vincent getting up at 4:30 a.m. for his shift, packing his own lunch in a worn metal lunchbox. There were no posts about him spending a Saturday fixing the leaky faucet under the sink because Ania insisted calling a plumber for $250 was beneath them, but also refused to pay for it. The dollar tagging of their life was a constant, unspoken battle. His watch was an $89 Timex, a gift from his father, reliable and unpretentious. Hers was a $1,500 Movado, which she claimed was a necessary accessory for networking. He drove his paid-off Camry. She leased the Lexus. He wore $60 Carhartt work pants and steel-toed boots. She wore $400 Tory Burch flats to go to the grocery store. The contrast was never more apparent than in their closets, which stood side by side. His was a neat, sparse collection of functional clothing. Hers was an explosion of designer labels. A $2,400 Burberry dress she'd worn once, a row of Kate Spade purses totaling over $3,000, shoes that cost more than his monthly car insurance and food budget combined. "You know, Vincent," she'd said one evening, holding up one of his favorite plaid shirts, "this just screams I operate heavy machinery. Don't you want to project a more successful image?" "My image is that I'm a man who works hard and pays his bills, Ania," he had replied calmly, not looking up from the book he was reading. "That's successful enough for me." Her sigh was a gust of theatrical disappointment. It was a sound he had come to know well. It was the sound of her contempt. She saw his contentment not as a sign of inner peace, but as a failure of ambition. She didn't understand the profound satisfaction he got from his job. Sitting in the crane's cab, 16 stories above the ground, orchestrating the delicate dance of massive containers, he felt a sense of mastery and purpose. He saw the sunrise over the Pacific, a daily miracle most people slept through. He was a vital part of a global artery, a link in a chain that brought goods to millions. To Ania, he just drove a big forklift at the docks. Her casual dismissal of the work that paid for her $150 haircuts and her $90 yoga classes was a constant, grinding abrasion against his soul. He had started to feel less like a husband and more like a walking, talking ATM with a disappointing credit limit. The cruelty had escalated so gradually he almost didn't notice it, like a lobster in a pot of slowly warming water. At first, it was just words, little barbs disguised as jokes. At a dinner party with her friends, one of them, a corporate lawyer, asked Vincent what he did. Before he could answer, Ania jumped in, laughing a tinkling, false laugh. "Oh, Vinny plays with the world's biggest Tonka toys down at the port. It's adorable." The table chuckled politely. Vincent felt a hot flush of shame creep up his neck. He saw the pitying look in the lawyer's eyes. He smiled a tight, empty smile and said nothing. He learned that saying nothing was his best defense. Then came the financial betrayals. He had a separate savings account, money he'd inherited when his mother passed away. It was his emergency fund, a sacred $25,000 he never touched. Ania knew about it. One month, she came to him with a panicked look on her face. Her Lexus needed a major, unexpected repair, she claimed, something to do with the transmission. It would be $4,200. She'd been irresponsible, she confessed, and had overspent on her credit cards. She cried, her tears looking genuine and glistening on her deep brown skin. He felt a pang of sympathy for her distress. He was a provider, a protector. It was his instinct to solve the problem. He transferred the money. 2 weeks later, while looking for an insurance document in her glove compartment, he found a receipt from a spa resort in Ojai. The total was $4,187.50. It was for a wellness weekend with 2 of her friends, dated the same weekend the car was supposedly in the shop. He put the receipt back, his hand trembling slightly. He said nothing. He just took a screenshot of their joint account showing his transfer to her, and saved the image in a folder on his computer he'd labeled simply Evidence. The isolation tactics were next. His family lived in Victorville, a 2-hour drive away. He used to see his father and sister every other weekend. Ania started scheduling things on those weekends: mandatory brunches, charity events, tickets to shows she'd bought months in advance. "Oh, baby, I completely forgot this was your weekend to see your dad. We just can't get out of this fundraiser. You understand, right?" He did understand. He understood she was deliberately severing his ties to his own family. The final straw on that front was when his sister, Keisha, called him in a panic. Their father had been taken to the hospital with chest pains. It turned out to be severe indigestion, but for a few hours it was terrifying. When Vincent confronted Anaya, demanding to know why she hadn't told him Keisha had called her phone, his was on silent at work. She'd shrugged. "I didn't want to worry you over nothing while you were operating that dangerous crane, sweetie. I was protecting you." The lie was so audacious, so insulting to his intelligence, that something inside him went cold and hard. He stopped fighting for the weekend visits. Instead, he started calling his father every single day during his lunch break, from the quiet solitude of his crane cab high above the world. The ultimate betrayal, the one that finally pushed him to seek legal counsel, was over his condo. He had bought a small one-bedroom condo in Bixby Knolls with the first bit of money he'd ever saved, long before he met Ania. It was his. The deed was in his name alone. It was his piece of the world, his security. It was currently rented out, providing a modest but steady stream of passive income. One evening, Ania sat him down on their $4,000 sofa. She had spreadsheets printed out. She'd made a presentation. "Vincent," she began in her most reasonable professional voice, "I've been looking at our financial future. This condo of yours, it's dead weight. The appreciation is slow. If we sell it, we could have a down payment for a real house, a house in Belmont Shore like my parents. It's not our financial future, Ania. It's my condo. It was my mother's dream for me to own property. I'm not selling it." Her face changed. The mask of the reasonable wife fell away, revealing the cold, hard fury beneath. "It's selfish, Vincent. You're holding us back. What's wrong with you? Don't you want more for us? Or are you happy just being a glorified dock worker living in a rental forever?" "I am happy," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "The question is, why aren't you?" She stood up, her body vibrating with rage. "I want a partner, not an anchor. You are holding me down with your small, pathetic life." She stormed out of the room. He sat there for a long time, the silence of the apartment pressing in on him. He looked at the spreadsheets she'd left on the coffee table. She had already calculated her potential share of the profits from the sale of his property. The next morning at 8 a.m., he made a phone call and scheduled a consultation with a family law attorney named Zara Adebayo. He had no idea what was coming, but for the first time, he felt a flicker of something other than despair. He felt the cold, clear-eyed calm of a man preparing for a war he never wanted but knew he had to win. The decision to start documenting his life felt less like a choice and more like a survival instinct. After the fight about the condo, a switch flipped in Vincent's mind. The fog of trying to please Ania, of hoping she would one day see and appreciate him for who he was, finally cleared. He saw the marriage for what it was, a transaction in which he provided stability and she provided, what exactly? Criticism? Contempt? He realized he had been playing defense for years, constantly reacting to her moods and demands. It was time to play offense, but his version of offense was quiet, methodical, and invisible. He bought a small $40 notebook from the Staples on Bellflower Boulevard and began a log. He wrote down the date, the time, and a verbatim account of their interactions. He recorded the comment about his Tonka Toys job. He detailed the lie about the $4,200 car repair. He noted every time she forgot to pass on a message from his family. He wrote down her exact words from the condo fight. "You are holding me down with your small, pathetic life." Reading it back, the words on the page were even colder than they had sounded in the air. They were stripped of her tone, of the crocodile tears or the feigned concern. They were just what they were: evidence of profound disrespect. His first meeting with Zara Adebayo was a revelation. Her office was in a sleek glass tower in downtown Long Beach, a world away from the grit and steel of the port. Ms. Adebayo was a sharp, elegant black woman in her 40s, her hair in immaculate twists, her suit a tailored navy that probably cost $1,500. She listened to Vincent's story for a full hour without interrupting, her expression calm and empathetic. He told her everything, his voice low and steady. He told her about the financial control, the isolation, the constant belittling. He expected judgment, perhaps even pity. Instead, he got strategy. "Vincent," she said, her voice rich and confident, "what you're describing is a classic pattern of coercive control. It's emotional and financial abuse. The good news is, you've started doing the most important thing you can do. You're documenting it." She laid out a clear path for him. He was to continue acting as normal as possible. No confrontations, no arguments. He was to become a ghost in his own marriage, observing and recording. "She underestimates you," Ms. Adebayo said, a faint smile on her lips. "That is your single greatest advantage. She sees a simple man. She has no idea she's married to a strategist." The words sent a jolt of strength through him. A strategist. He liked the sound of that. He paid her the $5,000 retainer from his private savings account, the one Ania didn't know he'd replenished. It felt like the best money he had ever spent. He left her office feeling taller, lighter. The sky over the city seemed brighter. Living the double life was the hardest part. He had to go home every day and pretend to be the same pliable, accommodating husband. He endured Ania's moods, her passive-aggressive sighs, her endless complaints about their life. He would listen to her talk for an hour about a minor disagreement with one of her friends, nodding in all the right places while inside he was miles away cataloging her every word. He made her dinner. He complimented her expensive new outfits, which he knew were being charged to their joint card. He played the part of the doting husband. Each act of normalcy was a lie, a carefully placed piece of camouflage hiding the methodical dismantling of their life together that he was planning in secret. One Saturday, she came home from a shopping trip and tossed a glossy brochure for a new housing development in the Orange County city of Irvine onto the kitchen island. "Look at these," she said, her voice bright with excitement. 5 bedrooms, a community pool. "This is the kind of life we should be living, Vinny." He picked up the brochure. The home started at $1.4 million. He looked at her face flushed with desire for a life funded by a man she didn't respect, and felt nothing. Not anger, not sadness, just a profound, empty calm. "They look nice," he said, his voice perfectly even. He put the brochure down and went back to washing the dishes. Later that night, he took a picture of the brochure and emailed it to Ms. Adebayo with the subject line, Exhibit G. He was playing dumb, but he had never felt smarter in his entire life. What's the one piece of advice you'd give to someone who feels underestimated by their partner? Share your wisdom below. The dining room at his in-laws' Belmont Heights home was Ania's mother's pride and joy. It was a symphony in beige and gold. A massive $8,000 mahogany table, polished to a mirror shine, dominated the space. A crystal chandelier, which he knew cost a staggering $5,000, hung above it, casting a cold, glittering light on the scene. The walls were covered in a textured, cream-colored wallpaper, and the only art was a series of bland, expensive-looking landscape paintings. It was a room designed for display, not for comfort. It felt like a museum exhibit on the wealthy family. Vincent sat in his usual spot, to the left of Ania's father, Dr. Marcus Thorne. Marcus was a retired cardiothoracic surgeon, a man whose hands had saved lives but who now seemed to only use them to lift a glass of $200 Cabernet to his lips. He was quiet and observant, but his silence always felt like judgment. Across the table, Ania's mother, Eleanor, held court. She was a thin, perfectly coiffed woman whose life revolved around her garden club and charity luncheons. She spoke about her recent trip to Europe, casually dropping the names of five-star hotels and Michelin-starred restaurants. Ania's brother, Michael, sat next to Vincent. Michael was the only one in the family who seemed to exist on planet Earth. He was a high school history teacher and football coach, a solid, good-natured man who always made a point to ask Vincent about his work at the port with genuine interest. Dinner was a roasted chicken, potatoes au gratin, and asparagus with hollandaise sauce. It was delicious. Eleanor was a fantastic cook. As he ate, Vincent felt the familiar tension begin to build. It started with Eleanor. "Vincent, dear," she said, dabbing her lips with a linen napkin. "Did Ania tell you we ran into Judge Henderson at the club? His son just made partner at his law firm in Los Angeles. He's only 34. "That's great for him," Vincent said, keeping his tone light. "Yes," Eleanor continued, her eyes sweeping over Vincent's simple polo shirt. "It's just so wonderful to see young men with that kind of drive." The implication hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Ania, who had been quiet until now, saw her opening. "Well, Mom, not everyone is built for that kind of high-pressure corporate world," she said, placing a hand on Vincent's arm. It was meant to look like a gesture of support, but he could feel the condescending pat. "My Vin is happy with his simple life, aren't you, honey?" The table went quiet. Michael shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Doctor?" Thorne took a slow sip of his wine, his eyes fixed on Vincent. This was it, the main event. Vincent could feel the trap closing around him. He had been in this position 100 times before, forced to either defend his life's choices or sit in emasculated silence. But tonight felt different. There was a finality in Ania's tone, a sharp, predatory gleam in her eyes. He had a feeling this wasn't just another jab. This was the kill shot. He met her gaze. "I am happy, Ania," he said, his voice calm and clear. "I'm proud of the work I do." Ania laughed, a short, sharp bark of a sound that held no humor. "Proud? Of what? Of driving a joystick in a glass box all day? Vincent, we need to talk about our future, a real future. I can't do this anymore. I can't be married to a man with no ambition." The air in the room crackled. Eleanor looked thrilled, as if her favorite soap opera had just come to life. Marcus's face was a stony mask. Michael looked horrified. "Ania," Michael started, "this is not the time or the place." "It is the perfect time and place," Ania snapped, her voice rising. She turned her full attention to Vincent, her face a mask of righteous indignation. "I have given you every chance to step up, to be the man I deserve, to sell that stupid condo and invest in us, to look for a better job, and you have done nothing. So now you have a choice. Right here, right now, in front of my family." She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a dramatic, venomous whisper. "You will either look at me, and you will beg me to stay with you and promise to change, to do whatever it takes to build a real life for us. You will beg, or you can get up from this table, walk out that door, and we are done. Beg, Vincent, or leave." The silence that followed was absolute. It was so quiet Vincent could hear the faint hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. He looked at Ania, at her triumphant, expectant face. He looked at her mother, who was watching him with a smug smile. He looked at her father, whose expression was unreadable. And he looked at Michael, who was shaking his head slowly, a look of profound disgust on his face. In that moment, everything became crystal clear. He saw the entire chessboard. He saw her move, and he saw his. It was the easiest decision he had ever made. Slowly, deliberately, Vincent placed his fork and knife together on his plate. He picked up his linen napkin, wiped his mouth, and folded it neatly, placing it beside his plate. He pushed his chair back, the sound of the wood scraping against the floor unnervingly loud in the silence. He stood up. He was a tall man, and his presence suddenly seemed to fill the room. He didn't look at Ania. He looked directly at her mother. "Eleanor," he said, his voice perfectly level, imbued with a grace and dignity that stunned the room. "Thank you for dinner. It was, as always, delicious." Then he turned and walked out of the dining room. He didn't run. He didn't slam the door. His footsteps were steady and even on the hardwood floor of the hallway. He opened the heavy front door, stepped out into the cool evening air, and closed it gently behind him. The click of the latch was the last sound he would ever hear in that house. The drive from Belmont Heights to his condo in Bixby Knolls was only 15 minutes, but it felt like a journey across a continent. The sun had finally set, leaving behind a sky bruised with purple and orange. The streetlights flickered on, one by one, illuminating his path to freedom. Vincent drove with both hands on the wheel of his Camry, his gaze fixed on the road ahead. He felt nothing. The anxiety that had been his constant companion for years was gone. The dread had vanished. In its place was a vast, quiet, and utterly peaceful emptiness. He had been carrying 100-pound weight on his back for so long that he hadn't realized how bent and broken it had made him. Now, it was gone. He felt light. He felt straight. He felt free. As he turned onto Atlantic Avenue, his phone, which had been sitting silently in the cup holder, lit up. The screen read, "Ania." He let it ring. It went to voicemail. 30 seconds later, it rang again. "Ania." He ignored it. He was passing a small park, and he could see a family playing on the swings, their laughter carrying on the evening breeze. It was a simple, happy scene. It was everything he now had a chance to find for himself. The phone rang a third time, and a fourth. He was unlocking the door to his condo, the one she called dead weight, when his phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Michael, her brother. He opened it. "Michael, hey man, I am so sorry. What she did was unforgivable. I've never been more ashamed of my sister. Please let me know you got home okay." Vincent typed back a simple reply. "Vincent, I'm home. Thanks, man. I appreciate you." He stepped inside the condo. It was small, but it was his. He'd furnished it with simple, sturdy furniture from IKEA. His mother's picture was on the wall. It smelled like home. He took off his shoes and set his keys on the small table by the door. His phone buzzed again. And again. He looked at the screen. 5 missed calls from Ania. Then a text message from her appeared. "Ania, you can't be serious. You are really going to walk out like that? After everything I've done for you?" He read the words and a small, humorless smile touched his lips. Everything she'd done for him. He didn't reply. Meanwhile, back in the beige and gold dining room in Belmont Heights, chaos had erupted. The moment the front door clicked shut behind Vincent, the spell of stunned silence was broken. Ania stared at the empty doorway, her mouth slightly agape, her triumphant expression melting into disbelief, then confusion, and finally, panic. "Well, I guess that's that," she said, trying to sound breezy and unaffected, but her voice trembled. Eleanor, her mother, was the first to speak. Her smug smile was gone, replaced by a look of cold fury. But it wasn't directed at the empty chair. It was directed at her daughter. "What have you done?" she hissed, her voice low and dangerous. "Are you a fool?" "What?" Ania stammered. "I did what you said I should do. I gave him an ultimatum. I showed him I won't be walked all over." "You didn't give him an ultimatum, you fool," her father, Marcus, said, his voice cutting through the room like a scalpel. He had been silent until now, but his words carried immense weight. "You gave a good man an excuse to leave a toxic situation. You humiliated him, and in doing so, you have humiliated yourself and this family. But, Daddy, he's just a crane operator," Ania wailed, the facade of the strong, independent woman crumbling to reveal the spoiled child beneath. Michael slammed his hand down on the table, making the crystal glasses jump. "He is 10 times the man you'll ever be a woman for, Ania," he roared, his face red with anger. "He is kind, he is decent, and he works his ass off to pay for your ridiculous lifestyle. He loved you, and you just spat in his face because you're ashamed of him. Well, right now, I'm ashamed of you." Ania looked from her mother's fury to her father's disgust to her brother's contempt. The united front she had always relied on had crumbled. They weren't on her side. They were on his. The graceful, dignified way he had walked out had exposed her cruelty for what it was: ugly, petty, and cheap. His silence was louder than any screaming match could ever be. He hadn't fought. He hadn't begged. He had simply left. And in doing so, he had taken all the power in the room with him. The panic in Ania's chest exploded into full-blown terror. She fumbled for her $1,200 iPhone and frantically dialed his number. It rang and rang. Voicemail. She tried again. Voicemail. She started pacing the dining room, her expensive heels clicking frantically on the polished floor. "He's not answering. Why isn't he answering?" she cried. "Perhaps," her father said, standing up and folding his own napkin with surgical precision, "it's because he has nothing left to say." By the time Vincent had poured himself a glass of water in the quiet of his own kitchen, his phone showed 13 missed calls. The texts were becoming more frantic. "Ania. Vincent, pick up the phone. We need to talk about this. Ania. This is ridiculous. You're being so childish. Ania. Okay, I'm sorry, I was upset. Just come back and we can talk. Ania. Vincent, please, where are you?" He read them all one by one. He felt a distant pity for the woman unraveling on the other end of the screen. But it was the pity one feels for a stranger. The connection was gone. She had severed it herself, with her own words. He sat down on his simple, $600 sofa. He looked at the picture of his mother, and for the first time in a very long time, he felt at peace. The phone rang again. He watched the screen light up with her name. He let it go. By 9 p.m., there would be 23 missed calls, but Vincent wasn't counting anymore. He was already gone. The next morning, Vincent woke up at 4:30 a.m., just like he did every weekday. The silence in the condo was absolute. There was no rustle of silk sheets from the other side of the bed, no passive-aggressive sigh as he got up for work. There was only peace. He made his coffee, packed his lunch, a simple turkey sandwich on wheat bread, an apple, and a bottle of water, and was out the door by 5:15 a.m. The drive to the port in the pre-dawn darkness was calming. He was in control of his world. At 8:05 a.m., during his first break, he sat in the Crane's cab, 160 feet in the air, with the port of Long Beach spread out below him like a giant's toy set. He checked his personal email on his phone. There was a message from Zara Adebayo. Subject, ready to proceed. Vincent, per our last conversation, all documents are prepared. I have the petition for dissolution of marriage ready to be filed. Please confirm if you wish for me to proceed. Once filed, a process server will be engaged to serve your wife. Let me know how you wish to handle this. Best, Zara Adebayo, Esquire. He looked out the window of the cab at a massive container ship from Shanghai being nudged into place by tugboats. He thought about the ultimatum. He thought about Anaya's face, so sure of her power. He thought about his quiet walk out the door. He typed his reply. Zara, please proceed immediately. Serve her at our rental address. Thank you. Vincent, he hit send. A single container, filled with thousands of televisions or sneakers or coffee makers, was lifted from the ship and swung gracefully through the air, guided by his steady hands, to a waiting truck below. It was just another box, another move, another part of his day. But it felt different. It felt like the first move in his new life. Ania's downfall was not a single dramatic event. It was a cascade of consequences, a series of dominoes that fell one by one, all triggered by her own arrogance. The first was the family. After Michael stormed out of the house that Sunday night, followed shortly by his father, Eleanor had finally turned on Anaya, her words like ice shards. Your father has cut off your credit card, the one he pays for. You are on your own. For Anaya, who had never truly supported herself, this was a death sentence. The $680 per month lease payment for the Lexus was suddenly an impossible sum. The car was repossessed 2 weeks later. The second domino was her friends. News of the disastrous dinner spread through their social circle like wildfire, with Michael making no secret of his sister's shameful behavior. Ania's narrative of being the long-suffering wife of an unambitious husband was shattered. The new story, the true story, was of her cruelty and his quiet dignity. Her friends, who had always enjoyed her gossip but secretly envied her seemingly stable marriage, now looked at her with pity and a touch of contempt. The invitations to brunch dried up. The phone calls stopped. She was a social pariah. The third and most definitive domino was the process server. He was a large, impassive man who knocked on the door of her rental apartment on a Tuesday afternoon. He handed her a thick manila envelope. You've been served, he said, his voice devoid of emotion. Ania stood in the doorway, the papers in her hand. Dissolution of marriage. The legal language was cold and brutal. She saw the list of assets. She saw that Vincent's condo was listed as sole and separate property. She saw that he was not seeking anything from her, only a clean break. Her name was on the lease for their expensive apartment, but his name was on the bank account that paid for it. The lease was up in 60 days. She had 2 months to find a new place to live on her own, with no income. The voicemail she left on Vincent's phone, which he had since unblocked on his lawyer's advice to collect evidence, told the story of her collapse. The first was angry. How dare you serve me with papers, Vincent? After everything, you are a coward. You can't even face me. The second was pleading. Vinny, baby, please. We can work this out. I was stressed. I didn't mean it. I love you. Just call me. The third was sobbing. I don't know what to do. My parents won't help me. I'm going to lose the car. I'm going to be homeless. Please, Vincent, you can't do this to me. The fourth was a quiet, defeated whisper. I made a mistake. I know I made a mistake. I was wrong. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Vincent listened to them all, one after another, in the peace of his condo. He saved them to the cloud and forwarded the files to Zara. He didn't feel triumph. He didn't feel schadenfreude. He felt a profound sense of sorrow for the woman she had become, and an even more profound sense of relief that he was finally free of the wreckage she had created. He had begged for nothing, and in the end, he was about to get everything he truly wanted, his life back. 6 months passed. The divorce was finalized with quiet efficiency. Ania, represented by a court-appointed lawyer, had tried to lay claim to a portion of his condo and his pension. Zara Adebayo, armed with Vincent's meticulous notes, text messages, and bank statements, shut it down completely. The judge ruled that the marriage was short, that Ania had made no contribution to Vincent's premarital assets, and that her pattern of financial exploitation was clear. She walked away with nothing but her personal belongings and half of the debt on the joint credit card. Vincent kept his condo, his pension, and his dignity. Life settled into a new, peaceful rhythm. The silence in his home was no longer a void, but a sanctuary. He filled it with jazz music, the smell of his own cooking, and the sound of his own thoughts. He reconnected with his father and sister, driving out to Victorville every other weekend without fail. They had long, easy conversations on his father's porch, drinking iced tea and watching the desert sky turn pink at dusk. He felt the frayed threads of his own identity knitting themselves back together. At work, he was promoted to a training supervisor position. It came with a modest raise, bringing his salary to $78,000, but the real reward was the work itself. He found a deep and abiding satisfaction in mentoring the new operators, young men and women full of nervousness and ambition. He would sit with them in the training simulator and then in the real cab, his calm voice guiding their hands on the controls. He taught them not just the mechanics of the job, but the philosophy of it, the patience, the precision, the quiet pride in a job done well. He saw himself in them, and he felt a sense of purpose he hadn't realized he was missing. One of his best trainees was a young black woman named Maya, her hair in long, beautiful braids that clicked with beads when she turned her head. She was a quick learner with a natural feel for the machinery. "You make it look so easy, Vincent," she said one afternoon, as he flawlessly guided a 40-ton container onto a truck bed. "It's not about ease, Maya," he told her, his eyes on the load. "It's about respect. Respect the machine, respect the weight, and respect the people on the ground. Everything else follows from that." On Sundays, his day of rest, he developed a new ritual. He would drive down to Cabrillo Beach, near the entrance to the harbor. He'd walk along the water's edge, watching the great ships glide in and out of the port. He could see the tops of the cranes from there, his cranes, standing like silent sentinels against the sky. It was a reminder of where he came from and how far he had traveled. The sun would warm his skin, and the salty breeze would feel like a cleansing. One late afternoon, as the sun was casting a golden path across the water, he saw her. Anaya was walking further down the beach, alone. She looked different, smaller. The expensive clothes were gone, replaced by simple jeans and a t-shirt. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. She saw him at the same moment. For a second, he saw a flash of the old panic in her eyes, and she looked like she was about to turn and run, but she didn't. She hesitated, then walked slowly toward him. "Vincent?" she said, her voice quiet. "Ania?" he replied, his tone neutral, not cold, but not warm. I heard about your promotion," she said. "Michael told me. Congratulations." "Thank you." An awkward silence hung between them. She looked down at the sand, then back up at him, her eyes glistening. "I'm working now," she said, "at a retail store in the mall. It's humbling." She took a deep breath. "I wanted to say, I know it's too late, but I am truly sorry. For everything. For how I treated you. For what I said. You were a good husband. You were a good man. I was the one who was small." Vincent listened to the words he once thought he needed to hear, and he realized, standing there in the golden light of the setting sun, that he didn't need them anymore. His peace was not dependent on her apology, but he saw the genuine remorse in her eyes, the hard-won humility of a person who had lost everything and been forced to rebuild. He offered her a small, sad smile. "I forgive you, Ania," he said, and he meant it. He forgave her not for her sake, but for his. It was the last chain to break. "I hope you find what you're looking for." He nodded once, then turned and continued his walk down the beach toward the setting sun. He didn't look back. He was walking toward his future. A future built not on the shifting sands of someone else's approval, but on the solid rock of his own character. True wealth, he now understood, isn't measured by the price tag on your car or the square footage of your house. It's not about projecting an image of success. It's about the quiet dignity of your work, the strength of your character, and the peace in your own heart. It's about knowing your own value, even when the world, or the person sleeping next to you, tells you that you are worthless. True wealth is the freedom to walk away from a table where respect is no longer being served. We all face moments where we have to choose our dignity over a relationship. If Vincent's story resonated with you, hit the like button and subscribe to Love Beyond Pride for more stories of strength and self-respect. What would you have done in his shoes?